Welcome, everybody. We are back. I know you're as shocked and surprised as we are. Back for season 3, Adam. What do you think?
I am surprised that they keep bringing us back. I mean, thank you, Future Ready. Thank
Yes.
you, AWS for support because, geez, I think we're trying our best to not be on, but I think, we bring enough information where they want to bring us back. So, we want to thank you for all AWS for sponsoring this.
It's always dangerous when you give tech leaders a microphone and an opportunity to really just voice all their displeasures and rant and rave. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job of balancing some of the stuff that we deal with, and kind of being therapy for some of those out there. So I do appreciate all of our listeners this season and the last few seasons. What's changed? So, I mean, since we last recorded, Adam and I ended last season with an epic hot wing challenge that you have to go back and watch if you haven't yet. Adam's hair caught on fire. He couldn't feel his teeth. There was all sorts of problems happening. Absolute breakdown when we hit Dave's insanity sauce. You'll have to watch that one. But what's changed for you, Adam, in the last 3 months? That was New Year's Day, I think, when we recorded that, or right around then.
It was around
in your life, in the world,
like
in the
third.
country.
Yeah. Crazy thing. I got COVID
in the middle of that show. It turns out he had COVID.
I mean, so yeah, it is real. End up turning into P pneumonia, not pneumonia, but P pneumonia. That's worse. Yeah. P pneumonia is really bad. Literally took me out for like the whole month of January, but wow. I'm back and better than ever. So and now I'm fully vaccinated. I just got to wait my I think 12 more days to be 100%. So woohoo! How about you?
Welcome to the club. Yes, fully vaccinated as well. Did that early. I actually went to, believe it or not, I went to my first in-person speaking gig in about, it would have been about 13 months. I think you and I were the last. You were probably one of the last people I was near when I got on a plane, because we went to a Future Ready thing together last February, and I got to actually speak. It was it was to a bunch of principals in Colorado. There were 40 people in a room made for 800, so you can imagine what that sounded like. But it was still good to be in front of people, so I wanted to make sure I was fully vaxxed before I traveled. But that's been interesting. We also had a change in our president, which we kind of talked about a little bit on the last season, and we see some interesting trends already. We've got some, a new ed. What am I thinking of? What's the name of the title? The Board of Education, not the Board of Education,
Director,
whatever. DeVos. Thank you, DeVos. I'm just thinking DeVos. I couldn't get the name out of my head. A new DeVos, I should say. That's not really a nice thing to say, but a new Secretary of Education. It's interesting because I feel like one of the first things they did that I didn't agree with was they said, "Oh, the testing thing is happening, man. We're going to do that anyway." And I'm like, "Really, feds? I mean, of all years, you're going to push that now?" I'm like, this was an opportunity to say, "Yeah, we'll take a pass." So I don't. What are your thoughts on them saying you have to still do your test although some states aren't?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's more of a tongue-in-cheek kind of deal where they're telling us to test. But I know we looked at it here in Georgia, we're going to test, but you can't make the virtual kids come on site to take a test. They have the option to take the test. You can't tell them not to. But you have to provide them an option or a time slot to come on campus to take it. And which most of them are saying, "No, I'm not doing that," which I totally get.
Yeah.
But the issue we're running into now are the face-to-face parents are like, "Hey, that kid doesn't have to take this test. Why are you making my kid take the test? I'll take my kid back home then and be virtual so he doesn't have to take the test." Because realistically, some parents don't want that test stress on their child, but some parents want to because they're like, this term learning loss. Some parents, want to know, hey, is my child not that smart anymore because of this virtual learning? So some parents actually do want that marker to tell them that. Now, whether that marker is going to tell them that or not remains to be seen because the test doesn't measure that. But that's going to be where in my mind, some districts are going to feel the burn because parents are going to take that measurement and say, hey, my kid didn't learn anything because they've been virtual. You need to be back 100% for every kid. So that's why I feel it's like this double-edged sword kind of piece with this assessment, because the assessment is not modified for the kind of learning our kids have done. And they're still going to be held to that same standard, the previous being in, butts and seats, learning the way they've learned in the past. And we've had all kind of quarantines and shutdowns throughout the school year. So it's still not the same.
And we had the tech gods reached up their mighty hand here in Texas this week, actually early this week, when we did our online testing and struck down the entire system. So even though they were, so you've got school districts pushing because they need to have some sort of metric or measure, like you were saying, for possible funding down the road, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you've got them saying, okay, we're going to do it, but we'll do it all online. We'll be adaptable. If you're in person, you can do it on a computer. If you're at home, you can do it at home. Although they were not actually allowing that. They're making you come in and do it in like a computer lab. And then of course the tech gods came and said, yes, no, all servers shut down. Sorry, no testing taking place today. And now who knows when they're going to make that up. I mean, it keeps unraveling into a bigger mess, I feel like, with the testing. And they're trying to be adaptable, but I don't feel it. It's like, oh,
yeah, because then they're like, okay, are you going to do secure browser? And like, how the heck are you going to try to do secure browsing when
fisheye camera to see them and everything in the room, so they're not on their phone while they're
I mean, we don't have secure teaching going on, and that's one of my issues that I have with some of the grading policies that schools are doing, because the kid that's in the classroom right now taking an assessment or doing work, that they're quote unquote doing it by themselves. If the kid's at home, you don't know what's happening. I mean, mom or dad could be feeding them the answers. And I know there's teachers that listen to this podcast are probably laughing right now because they can tell you
know
when they're at the kids sounding out the word and the parents like, it's the.
It's like that little parent off stage during the play, where they're like sitting there by the curtain going, your line is this. Yes. That's totally it. I am like laughing because I am probably guilty of doing some of that myself. I've tried not to, but I'm like, you know what? You know the answer to this. And I'll read the 3 answers and I'm like, or is it C? I'm like, Dad, it's C. And I'm like, it's C. Yes, the answer is C. So you're right. We're not getting an authentic snapshot anyway. So maybe, and that's probably another good reason just to say scrap the whole thing. I don't know. And that's, obviously people that make bigger paychecks than we do or have better influence than we do make those decisions. But at some point, I feel like this was going to be the thing that one of the huge silver linings from the pandemic was going to be, we're going to break the assessment cycle and maybe it'll be adapted. I don't know. Because I think the trick is, and we talked about funding a second ago, this is going to affect this, because now the government is saying, here's millions of dollars. 20% of it locally has to be spent on this learning loss that we'll talk about a lot this season. And how do you identify that? Well, if you're the school district, you want everyone to get in right now and take those tests, because their scores are going to be super low. That way next year, when the government says, how did you spend it? It's like, look, our scores went up and you give us this money, right? So there's going to be a little bit of gamification there for leaders too. What have you heard on that front, and the learning loss, the funding part of it? What are you hearing out there? Yeah.
I just want to laugh at that. I mean, going back to that piece a second ago with grading, I mean, I have so many issues with grading because as a parent, I'm looking at it with a different set of lenses than I did as a teacher. It's what are grades? What are these test scores? It's just a way to rank. It's not really, in essence, when you talk about taking an assessment, it's, hey, this is what you know, this is how much you learned, this is where your gaps are, let's fill in these gaps. That is really truly not what we use our testing for right now. It's really to rank your kid, to say, okay, where are they in this class? It's to rank schools. Here's where the good schools are. And it affects property values. It affects all funding from the government, all these different things. So to your point, we had a great opportunity during this pandemic to hit the reset button and really restructure fundamentally how K-12 looks. But we didn't do that. And now when we start talking about some of this funding being tied to things, the funding is really not being tied to how are you changing teaching and learning for your kids. It's really how can you make things get back the way they used to be as fast as possible. And I think that's where a lot of folks are being held accountable to those dollars. Yep. Is not really using the dollars and with this kind of money, it's a lot of money that districts could have to really reformat and change the system the way it's set up. But it's how can we make things like they used to be as fast as possible with these dollars? Because there's almost so much plexiglass you can buy to put around kids. And then that's a one-time purchase. Yeah, we bought a bunch of plexiglass, but you still have your kids sitting in rows in classrooms surrounded by plexiglass now. You just gave every kid a computer instead of a notebook. So, I mean, those are those weird things that I see with funding that people are going to try to burn through this money to get it back like how it used to be versus using those dollars to really change the format and the delivery of instruction.
Yeah, the joke is that you're now with those, as you're explaining these rows and these plexiglass, I'm thinking in my head, we are giving them a cubicle work environment. So we're preparing kids for work. But the truth is we're not, because work doesn't even look like that anymore. I mean, Twitter and Google, some of these companies aren't even having employees ever come back. So we're not even preparing them for that. Like you could say that that's setting us up for the cubicle life, but it's not going to be there anymore. I think when they get up, probably, like I'm thinking about our kiddos who are like, in their 10, they're 10, 8, whatever,
Mhm.
still young, and 10 years from now, there's not gonna, there may be still some cubicles in some places, but that's not the future. And maybe it'll come. Maybe it's because
Mm.
we've been in this triage mode for so long that everybody wants to get back to quote unquote normal, that I think some innovation will be born out of this that we just haven't seen yet. Maybe it has to happen afterwards. I know that the last time this happened, I wasn't around, but it was 1919, I believe, and the Spanish flu.
Mhm.
There was all sorts of crazy things that happened
Yeah.
as a result of that societally, if that's a word. And I think we're going to start seeing it. We just don't know it because we're still in it. I guess
Yep.
we're kind of near the end. I mean, it's not. We don't have COVID in Texas. I don't know if you guys are listening out there, but it's not here. So we just
Yeah,
shoot it with our guns.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're wide open here in Georgia. I mean,
Yeah.
but you got to look at like the last time we had an economic crisis in our country. The Great Recession.
2008.
Look
Yep.
at Yeah, look at the industries that came out of that. I mean, post Great Recession, I believe that's where you got your Ubers of the world. That's where
Yep.
you got your Airbnbs, and even now during the pandemic, your Instacart and all those
Uber
kind
Eats.
of
Yep.
grocery Uber Eats. Like I remember seeing like Uber Eats for McDonald's. I'm like, what idiot is going to be using McDonald's? I mean, this fast food, you go there, and this idiot has done that now since when everything
That
was locked
$1
down.
milkshake becomes a $10 milkshake pretty quick,
Yeah,
man.
the kids wanted some McNuggets, and daddy got them nuggets. We were locked down. It was like Uber person brought them here. So I mean, there is opportunity for innovation during this window, and I just hope that schools allow themselves to be flexible enough to uh, be beacons of change, because I think it's bullcrap that all these people are saying, oh, we can reinvent education. And I'm looking for those school systems that are reinventing education right now. And if you're doing synchronous Zoom meetings with your kids, that's not reinventing
Oh,
education. Especially when you start talking about some of the data issues that we talked. Well, not gonna be data, the bandwidth issues that
mhm.
families have. Your internet service could have been great for what you do, watching Netflix every once in a while with your family and a couple people on computers. Well, a lot of people didn't have the bandwidth to handle 4 or 5 people at simultaneously on Zoom meetings, and also you got grandma that wants to watch her stories on Hulu. Who has all that? And heck, we have some of our teachers who said, I can't host my Zoom meetings because I don't have the capacity with my internet to do that. So I am very happy to see with our new FCC chair.
Yeah.
She's made a really big push to finish the last mile. So hopefully school systems won't have to utilize some of that those ESSER funds to do that. Hopefully that'll be something that the government can make a priority, make it a utility, whatever they need to do to get that fiber, replace those copper lines that some people have, and get fiber out to those areas.
And I hope that this season when we talk to our guests, I'm hoping to hear more about that, what those changes look like on their front. What are they going to do with the funds that they are getting, or are they hopeful like you are that maybe the feds will cover some of the cost of that fiber and that connectivity, so we can watch episodes of Bridgerton while we're actually doing Zoom calls. Not that I've ever seen that show. So this also brings me to another thing that I think we'll ask our guests a lot this year, and that is, what does the future hold for the next school year? I love your idea that, I mean, I love the analogy you just talked about, that what was brought about from the last kind of big hiccup we had with Uber. I know, is there Uber schools, or is there Uber learning, or not Uber necessarily, but that model of like on demand. I feel like I've already hearing some rumblings of schools, at least locally here in Austin, that are doing that. They're going to say, hey, you know what, next year we'll have some virtual options for some students. And maybe if you're in person school, you go to a room and you connect, and there's like a TA or somebody there to monitor, make sure you're not goofing around. But you can say like, oh, I need to take my daughter wants to take Italian, but her middle school doesn't offer it. So like, well, why
Mhm.
couldn't she just take it at another middle school that does offer it across town without being bussed over there? So maybe some of this will change. Are you hearing anything
Yeah.
about that? Like, what do you in terms of the virtual
Yeah,
versus
I'm hearing
not?
some of it, but then it's also schools struggling to make that pivot, because it's that like a thing where if you have kids that are virtual, are you still going to need the same number of buildings? And if
Yeah.
you have to reduce your number of buildings, it has that ripple impact. How's it going to impact your custodial staff, your food services, your bus drivers? And so I think that's one of the reasons why systems are kind of fighting some of these changes to really go as virtual and these options. It's kind of like that's the whole thing that we always joke about with Sears. They had the foundation to be Amazon. They had everything. You could get a lawnmower and you could get your bathing suit all in the same
That great
place.
big catalog. Yeah.
But they kind of focus more on brick and mortar versus their online piece, and they let a company who just sold books take it over. So my hope is for the future and the 21-22 school year and beyond, that school systems don't Sears themselves out of this whole education game, that they are trying to be flexible and look at opportunities to embrace this whole digital learning, because it's not good for all kids. But I've seen some research that the break traditional school work for them. This virtual learning has worked out for them. So it's not just something for your quote unquote bad kids that are turned to school. So we have to look at utilizing this time to really say, hey, this could be another version of K-12 schooling that's available for our students. It's a better fit for them. To me, this is school choice. This should be the choice that school systems focus in on and embrace and give them those opportunities, because you do have some politicians that are saying, hey, if your school system isn't open 100%, you can take your dollars and go to a neighboring district that is. And so school systems don't want to lose those dollars, because you need those butts and seats, you need those FTE dollars, whatever you call them in your state. So we want to make sure we're giving them the choice that they need, not only to keep them there, but also to make them successful members of society, lifelong learners, or whatever your mission and motto says, all those key buzzwords that you grab out of the keyword dictionary and put in there.
And close. And that was Adam's running for school board near a neighborhood near you speech about school choice. Yeah, I think it was also funny that while you were talking, I was getting a digital hiccup on my end. I'm like, of course, because again, bandwidth. Was interesting is that you and I had a conversation with somebody, Tracy, who's a previous guest on one of our podcasts, about funding of virtual teachers. And there's this thought that virtual teachers should get less money because they're doing less work because they're not in physical. What are your thoughts on that? Because I hear some schools already saying like, well, maybe it's a way for us to save money. We'll give them a little bit less because they're just working from their house.
It's not less work, it's different work. But it's going back to that mind shift of, okay, if you're learning behind a computer, does that make it less than learning in front of a person? We have to make that change, that behind a computer doesn't mean that it's any less or greater than face-to-face. Is this different? And so when people understand that it's different and it's still a workload that you have to deal with, we can make some progress. Now, as long as no one is making like Zoom detention. I saw a tweet.
What?
I think I shared it with you. I don't know if it was true or not, but someone had a tweet that said their kid got in trouble in their classroom, and the mom got a Zoom link for detention, that the kid had to go to Zoom detention. So hopefully that's not where we're going with all of this.
That's different. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to report to Zoom for detention. So hopefully we're not trying to make it that much like regular school. We're doing that.
Then we'll have the screen time warriors really coming at us big with what are you using? I'm using Zoom for screen time detention. Oh my goodness. I could only. Well, so then I guess the last thing I'll think that I want to talk about with our guests this season is like maybe so we're going to talk about funding. We're going to talk about the direction of where schools are going, but also the direction of these titles, the CTO, director of tech. It's been interesting because I've been living vicariously through you, of course. Full disclosure, I don't work in a school district, at the moment. I work with some as a consultant, but so to hear some of the battles and some of the things you're dealing with in terms of even just like org charts and who reports to who, and then it gets down to like, now we got to manage this whole other element of we're being at home support. What do you think? I mean, what's your thoughts before we ask the guests this, like the role of the CTO? What is it? What is it changing to? What should it have been anyway? Maybe, I don't know.
I think really with the CTO role now, it's if you were boots on ground CTO, it's really going to be very difficult to do that role. You're almost like, in sports analogy, you are the general manager of the team. You can't be the coach on the field right now because there's so many moving parts. And to your point earlier about the funding, you have to be in those meetings behind closed doors doing your best Olivia Pope impersonation or whatever to get those dollars moving where they need to go. So to be on the ground, like unboxing devices, and we all still like that work too, but it's to a point now where it's almost a political role in some cases with some of these things that are going on, because not all CTOs are part of the central office cabinet or whatever your district calls those. If you are, great. If you're not, then you have to figure out how to make sure the best choices are made with those dollars. As you were talking earlier about getting additional help, whether that's outsourcing some of your tech support to a phone system, or getting additional staffing, whether you utilize this money to make it like a grant funded position and let people know, hey, we only can guarantee this position for 2 years, and maybe the general fund can take it. Those kind of things you have to look at. But then if you're going with a virtual cyber school, where the technician technology support people live, is it a curriculum kind of position, or is it a technology position? Having all those relationships. So I think the CTO really has to look at that role as more of a general manager, if you will, to be behind the scenes and making everyone kind of get where they need to go. So with that being said, those CTOs have to have a director of technology or director of instructional technology to be that quote unquote offensive defensive coach coordinator to make those things happen for you, while since you can't be on the field calling the plays.
I love it. I love that analogy. I think there's some schools, of course, a lot of this depends on the size of the district too. I mean, some of the smaller districts I work with don't even have really anybody on the instructional tech side, or even the tech side. They're outsourcing somewhat. So I'm brought in to help with some of that. But the bigger districts, yeah, that offensive defensive coordinator, you got to have all that, and you got to be running all of it. You got to be running the budget. You got to be running personnel. I mean, it's everything that the great coaches do out there too. So I think that's a good analogy. I like it. We got to get into that maybe this season. So
yeah, and you got to have those folks that can put your plan in place together. Like, no plug for Carl, but definitely a plug for the work. I mean, you do great
Future
work
Ready.
there.
Future Ready does a lot of that too. I mean, they help with a lot of that.
But you have to have people who can take that instructional vision that you have and take your technology and make it work for your staff, for your building. And sometimes you can't be a prophet in your own land, so sometimes you do have to bring in an outside voice to talk to and kind of be your mouthpiece, if you will, to really make the masses understand where you're going. So because you don't want to spend a lot of money in technology and applications, and 2 or 3 years later you have nothing to show for what you spent all this money on. So that's one of those things. So like getting people like you in there to really do the work, because I mean you're an expert on that mindset. You have how many books now, Carl?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, I think. But I mean, I'm with you on that, and I do think that's and it's not about plugging either, because I will tell you too that if you have someone that's worth their salt, they come in. I've always said, like, I'm not going to be there full time. I shouldn't be, and I shouldn't be there forever. If you have a really good consultant, they're setting up a framework to get you the vision and the direction you need to be in. So when I'm gone, because I'm not there all the time, and when I'm gone forever, then you're already on the path to success. And I think that's like, I always joke that I'm kind of coaching myself out of my own job. I figure there'll be plenty of districts out there, but I'm like, if I'm doing it right, then I'm just happy with the success of them. Plus,
yeah.
I mean, $200 billion coming in. I mean, I'll just take half of that if you want, but no, no. I do think you're going to see I do think you'll see a rise with CTOs. I mean, not joking. We've talked about, I've talked about this offline a bunch, but the CTO role is always changing anyway. I think there's probably going to be a future of some consultancy mesh hybrid where smaller districts, especially, or like a consortium, are pulling together funds, saying like, we'll pull this CTO. You're amazing. You're talented. You know all the things you know. And I want you for like 4 districts will kind of cover you out of this, maybe this funding that's coming up. I don't know. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes happening in our world, I think. And maybe it's for the better, and maybe it's something that we need to evolve in anyway. But the people we talk to on the show, I know, are extremely talented too. So they're going to be faced with some of these same things.
Yeah, because it's now we have to get out of the making it from the AM to the PM. And it's, that's over now. You can kind of lean back on that and say, oh, we're just trying to make it.
Yeah.
That's not okay now. It's okay. You got the resources now, and financially. So how are you going to make it work? Put your infrastructure in place. Don't just think about right now. How are you going to set your district up for the next 5 to 10 years? So those are those things that are definitely out there. And so it's definitely reading the future ready framework. Whether you're going to move things to the cloud with a company like AWS. So it's looking at all those things that you have and making the best financial decision for the long term.
Yeah, and we don't plug Future Ready enough on the show, but I will. All joking aside, their framework is high quality. We used it in our district quite a bit. Just to, if nothing else, it gives you some direction. And the great thing about it, how much does it cost, Adam?
It is free 99. That is free 99.
Somebody out there will get that reference. Okay, everybody. Well, I'm excited about season 3. I think we have some Adam and I have some surprises planned for you as always, including something coming up in a few episodes down the road from now. And we're excited just to be back again for another season, and we'll be discussing funding and what the school year is going to look like, and how do we not just like totally go underground as CTOs in the future and just kind of continue to live and thrive in this environment.
And if you want to see the Hot Wings challenge again, Carl is willing to test out your hot sauce.
What? You know what? It's funny, but I told you this. We were texting back and forth the other day. I was like, I've actually gotten, since we've done that challenge, and I know it puts you in the hospital. Well, or maybe COVID. But since we did that challenge, I've been eating more hot sauce lately. I don't know why, but like Yellowbird, who's here locally in Austin, shout out to Yellowbird, because they're listening to the podcast. They replied to one of our tweets actually, but it was I was like, I put that on everything now. I throw it on my egg whites, I put it on my potatoes.
Hey, I think that's another company that says they put that on everything, but
Whoa, yeah. Well, I'm also vegetarian now, so if we do it again, I would have to do vegetarian wings. So I'll have to figure out what those taste like. Chicken.
I think I saw some like cauliflower
those are
wings.
really good. Those you don't joke. I mean, the Alamo Drafthouse, the theater here. Anyway, we're gonna do it's a whole nother part of the show, guys, that we'll get into when we talk about our nutritional challenges. But we do want to thank you guys for joining us. And again, for the listeners out there, make sure if you get a chance, please subscribe. Throw those 5 stars in there. It really helps us in our podcast be kind of brought up to the top. I don't know how iTunes and how the algorithms work, but when we get those ratings and even just a little review in there, we'd love it if you guys could plug the show in iTunes. We'll do some call outs here in the future. I need to go in and dig through the iTunes list and see what we have, because I know we're also on Spotify and a few other things, but iTunes, of course, with the algorithms, it's always good. So if you get a moment, you're listening to this, you enjoy what we have to say and what we've been offering for you, throw us 5 stars in there and a shout out. We'd love it. This has been the Undisrupted Podcast, brought to you by Future Ready Schools. As always, he's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And I have the pleasure of being joined by Carl, and you can find him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, everybody, we are better together.
And we are better undisrupted. This podcast is made possible by the generous support of Amazon Web Services.